So today and this football season, I'm starting a new video series called One Man Selection Committee. And I might change that name, but basically what I'm doing is I'm ranking teams if the playoffs started today, and then once the playoffs do start, I'll be my own selection committee. I rank the teams based on how well they can prove they can beat good teams, how well they handle business against teams that aren't as good, and if they avoid losses against bad teams. So let's get started. So at number 12, I have Michigan. And now we know Michigan took that horrible loss against Wisconsin. That happened. But I think Michigan's not nearly as bad as the way they played. But it doesn't really matter. I'm doing a resume rating, and it doesn't matter which team's better or which team's worse. Michigan's resume is really not that bad. They lost to a really good team in Wisconsin, top 5 FPI. I'm not sure what Wisconsin is in the FPI, but a pretty good team. And they beat Iowa. And the other thing I looked at is Michigan has the best win over 20th ranked Iowa of any of the remaining one-loss teams. Now there's one-loss teams ahead of Michigan, but of the one-loss teams behind Michigan, no team has a better win than Michigan. And I don't think Michigan's that good. I don't think they're the 12th best team, but they have the 12th best resume, and this is all I'm doing here, is I'm ranking the resumes. So on to number 11, which is Notre Dame. They had a very solid win over USC this past weekend, and they beat Virginia, and Virginia just lost to Miami. I don't think Virginia's that good. But it's a decent win. And they competed against Georgia. They didn't get blown out by Georgia. That's good enough to get them to the 11th spot. I mean, USC, probably not a top 25, top 30 team. I mean, in the FPI, I think they rank 22nd or something like that. So that's not bad at all. And the only reason they're at 11 is because Georgia's at 10. And I had to put Georgia ahead of Notre Dame because I'm a big believer in putting teams with even similar resumes. If they had a head-to-head matchup, I've always put the team that wins. I think you need to decide it on the field as much as possible. So at number 10, I have Georgia. They beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a top 10 FPI team, and I've been talking a lot about FPI. I'm a big believer in FPI. I think it's important to not look at, this, for instance, A&M, they've lost to the two number 1 teams in the country. They're 3-3. Who would expect a 3-3 team to be ranked? But still, A&M might be a good team. So I use predictive things to not to rank my teams, but to value the wins. So Georgia has a win over a top 10 Notre Dame team. And the only reason they're at number 10, really, they have one of the best wins of any of the top 12 teams. But the only reason they're at number 10 is because that South Carolina loss. And I don't think South Carolina is nearly as bad as everyone thinks. They've taken some unfortunate losses. I think North Carolina, that was a really close game. If they would have won that, things could have been different. They played all right against Alabama, but just, it's South Carolina. I mean, they got blown out by Missouri and Alabama and got beat by North Carolina. Not really a great team. Top 30, maybe top 30 in South Carolina. And Georgia just didn't. It was just a bad loss. They couldn't. And one of the things I'm ranking these teams on is how you handle the games where you can't get up. How do you handle playing average teams? And they didn't handle playing that team very well, and they took a loss. So that puts them at 10. So at number 9, we have Florida, and Florida has a win over top 10 Auburn, and they have the best loss of any of the top 12 teams to LSU. LSU, is a great team, and of all the top 12 teams, Florida has the best loss. And that's a tough place to go play at Death Valley. I'm not going to punish them too much for that, but they did lose, and we have to make winning and losing count. So they're at 9, and the only reason they're not higher, they've played a tough schedule. They've played 2 really tough teams. And the only reason they're not higher is because they struggled against Miami. And I know that's early in the season, but we still got to make that count. And they struggled against Kentucky. And they easily, if they didn't win against Kentucky, they easily, they could have lost against Kentucky. They had it in control, but they could have lost to Kentucky and very well could have lost to Miami. Could easily be a 5-2 team right now, but they're not. They're 6-1, and we're gonna reward that. But I'm not gonna put them too much higher, just due to the fact that they did struggle a little bit against Miami and Kentucky, and that hurts their resume a little bit. Now we're on to Penn State at number 8, and they had a solid win at Iowa. Playing at Kinnick is a tough place to play, and Iowa's not a horrible team, but Penn State just really didn't. I mean, they controlled the game. You knew Penn State was going to win that game the entire time. They looked good. They blew out Maryland. I'm not giving that too much credit. I mean, Purdue just blew out Maryland, so I'm not going to give them too much credit for that, but it was a good win. The only bad performance was against Pittsburgh, and I'll go ahead and say I have Clemson at number 7, and the only reason Penn State is behind Clemson is because Pittsburgh is a worse team than North Carolina, and Penn State played at home. Clemson played on the road at North Carolina. Those are two kind of struggle wins. Even though Clemson's game was closer, I just think it is a better performance to beat North Carolina by 1 than to beat Pittsburgh by 7. So I'm going to go ahead and put Clemson at 7 and Penn State at 8. Now, Clemson being at 7 is probably going to be controversial, and here's the reason. They've played Texas A&M. That's their toughest game, but they haven't been. They're the only team of the undefeated teams that struggled against anybody really badly. All the other undefeated teams ahead of them, so Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, Wisconsin, LSU, they haven't struggled yet. They haven't had a close game yet. Clemson did have a close game, and to not so great team could have easily lost. But they did have a dominant win over A&M. They dominated Florida State. And I don't think Florida State's as bad as everybody thinks. I don't think Florida State's been as bad as everybody thinks last year either. I think Florida State just gets really, really unlucky. Probably bad coaching, but they got a lot of talent and they're capable of doing a little bit more than what actually happens for Florida State. But for Clemson, I just don't feel comfortable putting them any higher because they did struggle against North Carolina. Now, I think Clemson. I think Clemson right now is probably one of the 3 best teams. But again, I'm going to keep stressing this. They have the 7th best resume, but they have a definitely for sure top 3 or maybe even number 1 best team. It's not putting Clemson at 7 is not saying that I don't think they're that good. I think they're very good. You looked at the last game they played really good. I think Clemson, if they keep dominating those ACC teams, they'll keep moving up. But for now, I have Auburn ahead of Clemson. I have Auburn at number 6. And part of the reason I have Auburn at number 6 is because they've played the toughest schedule of any of the top 12 teams that I have on this list. Maybe even the toughest schedule of any team so far. That's any team that's any good, I guess. But they had a solid win over A&M. They pretty much dominated that game. I know it was an 8-point victory, but they pretty much dominated. In Oregon, they barely slipped by, but we're going to give them credit for the Oregon win. Oregon's a top 10 team in the FPI, I believe. I believe they're number 10. And they played a tough game at Florida. They lost. They looked terrible. I don't really think, based on what Auburn did, I don't really think they're that good. I don't think they're top. I'd say, they're about 10th best team in the country. But they have the 6th best resume. And they have two, compared to LSU, they have similar, 2 of the best wins. I guess you could argue that LSU's wins over Texas and Texas and Florida are a little better than Auburn's, but Auburn has close to two of the best wins of any of these top 12 teams. That's why I'm putting them at 6. They definitely wouldn't make a playoff if it started today because they've lost, and Auburn's going to be the last one-loss team on this list, and so coming in at number 5 would be Ohio State. Now, Ohio State has no top 25 wins yet, or now wins over good teams, and the teams that, they do have, I guess Cincinnati's at ranked 24th in the FPI, as well as Michigan State's ranked 22nd in the FPI, and those aren't bad wins, but sometimes you just got to say, well, you just got to look at these advanced computer metrics, and you kind of have to disagree. I mean, Michigan State, who are they going to beat with their offense? I mean, it's one of the worst offenses I've ever seen. I mean, there's just no way they could beat anybody, really, any good teams. So I'm not going to give Ohio State too much credit for beating Michigan State or Cincinnati, but I will give them credit. They have dominated every team they've played. No game's been close at all. It gives them the number 5 spot, just because they haven't been able to prove that they can beat a good team yet. And number 4, Oklahoma has. Number 4, Oklahoma, they've beaten Texas, and I think Texas is a much better win than Michigan State. I think anybody would agree with that. That Texas win is way better than the Michigan State win for Ohio State. So that's why I have Oklahoma at number 4. Oklahoma's dominated everybody else besides Texas, and Texas is the best team they've played, and it's a better win than Ohio State. And besides that, I guess you could say, the Houston game was only Houston started coming back towards the end, but Oklahoma, it's one of those things where you just know Oklahoma's going to win that game no matter what. You're just like, there's no way Houston would come back. So I think Oklahoma's pretty dominated their schedule so far. And let me make sure. I just checked to make sure I was recording. That would have been bad if I wasn't recording. I've been talking for like 12 minutes. But yeah, I mean, Oklahoma, they beat Texas, and that's a pretty good win. And Texas is ranked a little higher in the AP poll than they should, but Texas is still a tough game. It's a good win, and Oklahoma's played in the game where they've proven they can beat a good team, whereas Ohio State just quite hasn't yet. And I think that'll change very soon with Ohio State, because I believe they will beat Wisconsin. Now at number 3, I have our guys, my guys, Alabama. And the only reason I have Alabama at number 3 is because they don't have better wins than the top 2 teams, which you'll find out in just a second. But we played pretty good against A&M. There's pretty dominant. Gave up a lot of points, but that's something I don't really even look at. I don't care if you're winning. If you win a game 80-60, that's still a 20-point victory. And I know there's a bit of a difference. I know a 20-0 win is more valuable than a 80-60 win. But anyways, one big over A&M, and we've dominated everybody else on the schedule. And the South Carolina win, not great, but South Carolina just did beat Georgia, and maybe South Carolina is going to turn out towards the end of the season a little better than people thought. But I'm not giving us too much credit for beating South Carolina. The only credit we really get is beating A&M. That's the only good team we've played so far. It's the only team we've proven we could beat. And the reason I have Alabama over Oklahoma is because I think Texas A&M and Texas, those are 2 comparable teams. I mean, if they're right next to each other in the FPI and S&P Plus and all these ratings right next to each other. Now I know in the AP rankings they're not very close, but the AP rankings is just kind of messed up. So I think Texas A&M and Texas, those are comparable wins. Oklahoma beating Texas, Alabama beating A&M, and the difference maker is that Alabama blew A&M out, and Alabama played on the road. So that's why I'm going to put Alabama at number 3. And coming in at number 2 is going to be Wisconsin. And Wisconsin played a top 15 team in Michigan. And what they do, they absolutely crushed them. I mean, they crushed Michigan. And they're not allowing very many points. And the Michigan State win was impressive. Now Michigan State, I don't think they could score. I've already said this, but I don't think Michigan State's offense is worth anything. But the Michigan State route, that when they just beat Michigan State 38-0, will make up a little bit for that sluggish Northwestern game. I think when you're Wisconsin, you kind of have to rate them differently. They're not the type of team that's going to hang 60 points up every time. They're going to beat you 31-0. That's what they'd rather do. They would rather beat you 31-0 than 61-32 or 62-31, whatever. But I think Wisconsin has a really good resume. I think Michigan's not terrible. I think top, probably 15th best team in the country. And obviously this could change next week. If Michigan were to lose big to Penn State, then I might move Wisconsin down a little bit. But the way they beat Michigan, now if they just barely beat Michigan, they might not be number 2. But they just destroyed Michigan, and that makes me put them at number 2. And for number 1, I think it's pretty obvious already, is LSU. I mean, if we're looking at resume, who has the best resume so far? It's obviously LSU. Now, you might not think LSU could beat Alabama or Ohio State, and I personally don't think they'd beat Ohio State or Alabama, but we'll see. They look really good, but the resume is all I care about, and their resume is the best of any team. They've beaten Texas, which is probably the 20th ranked team in the country, and they beat Florida, which is a close to being a top 10 team, kind of a fringe top 10 team, and those are 2 best wins of any undefeated team, and I don't know how you can argue against that. They've beaten, they haven't lost yet, and they've beaten the 2. They've had the 2 best wins of any top 12 team. It's self-explanatory that LSU would be number 1. So if we were to have a playoff today, I would select LSU, Wisconsin, Alabama, and Oklahoma based off the resume. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say it once again. This is a resume rating, so don't get mad at me for saying, there's no way Wisconsin's better than Alabama. I know that. This is a resume rating. It has nothing to do with how good the teams are. This is the fair way to do it. When you rank teams by their resume, it makes the games count. If you're just ranking teams by how good they are, it makes the games not matter. Because Georgia last year, they lost to LSU by like 20, and they lost to Alabama. In those games, if you were to select the playoff by how good the teams actually were, Georgia would have been in, and it would have made the Alabama and the LSU game not matter, and it would have made what's the point in watching the Georgia LSU game and having fun seeing that team seeing Georgia lose if they're going to get in the playoff anyway? Since we think they could beat Notre Dame and Oklahoma, like that's stupid. There's no point in doing that. This is the fair way to do it, is the resume. Who you beat, how'd you play, who'd you lose to. That's how we rank the teams. And I'm done here. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it isn't too long, but this is something I want to start. I think it's very interesting. I'm a little late on it this week. It's Wednesday. I'm going to try to do it on Mondays or Tuesdays. Maybe on Mondays or Tuesdays, I guess, when the playoff rankings come out. And I felt like this was the best first week to do it because basically because Georgia lost and we had the LSU Florida game. It's kind of the week everything is starting to shape in towards the playoffs. So hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it wasn't too long, and let me know if you want to continue watching these videos and if you want me to make more. Thanks.